Thank you. I'm going to start, instead of starting on electric vehicles, I'm going to start on something slightly different and sort of point out how electric vehicles become the obvious answer. My title is therefore Making Decentralized Storage Economics Work to Enable Rapid Growth of Renewables. Sir, you had mentioned that what can renewables do in urban, rural. I'm going to actually present that and talk what is possible. One of the things that in last few weeks we have seen bids in India both for solar as well as for wind, and the cost price for the new plants that are being set up came close to the cost of a greenfield coal plant. And from here onwards, the cost is only going to come down for solar. And India is rich in sunlight. So the question that I will ask is, what stops solar photovoltaic becoming the principal source of power in the country, which will be in line with what we agreed to when we signed the Paris Accord. What stops? What is the key problem? Why can't it become the dominant? Why can't it become 50, 60, 70%, both for urban and rural areas? Basically, the biggest issue about renewables, both for solar as well as wind, is basically that power has to be consumed instantly or stored. Now, the grid storage is about 3 to 4 times more expensive than the cost of power generation. So that is not an answer. And even with the storage prices coming down, it will become maybe 2 times more expensive, maybe as much as more expensive, but you are still doubling the cost. So storage is not going to be the primary answer. So we have to find alternative. The alternative is power generated has to be that since both demand and supply vary independently, either we'll have to get the thermal powers to back off when solar power is there. Remember that both solar and wind are intermittent. They will be there at some point, they will not be there. And if you are going to get the thermal plants to start backing off, the cost of the thermal plants will go up. So that is also not an answer. Or, of course, one can do demand management, where consumer is incentivized to use more when the grid is in surplus state and use less when the grid is in deficit state. Now, in fact, this whole conference, Smart Grid, is largely about that demand management. But demand management also requires storage. How do you really handle that? Because if I'm going to use more when the grid is surplus, what do I do with it? I have to store it somewhere. So essentially, it again comes back to the storage. So there is a compulsion for renewables. The renewable power will become an unfettered dominant supplier to power grid only with some kind of large-scale storage. But remember, we have mentioned the large-scale storage is just too expensive. So the storage price has to be borne by somebody else, where the related costs are independently affordable in the context of specific application of the stored energy. Somebody, for some other reason, is putting the storage, and if the grid can utilize that, that would really make renewable happen. And I think this is extremely critical, and how do you really get that to happen is what I'm going to talk about. The first such answer is in terms of electric vehicles. Electric vehicles with their storage, once it gets justified on its own merit, it can become a huge assistance to the grid and of coming of renewables. The second is going to be what I will call rooftop solar DC, both in urban and rural areas with storage. And I'll talk briefly about it, though primarily I'll talk about electric vehicles. And the third is smart buildings and factories with storage. And what does it make sense in its own right? And of course, the implementation of demand management. So I'll start with electric vehicles. Now, whether we like it or not, electric vehicle is future. Why is it future? First of all, it's 5 times more energy efficient. The electric motor is about 4 to 5 times more energy efficient than the conventional internal combustion engine. So it's a matter of time. One will figure out to use more efficient stuff. Number 2, the electric vehicles require much less moving parts, probably 15, 20, as opposed to the mechanical vehicles. So therefore, far more reliable. And therefore, one is going to move in that direction. The important thing is therefore the cost. What about the cost? EV versus petrol vehicles today, I'm talking about in Indian terms. I'm not talking about some international terms. Capital cost without battery is equal without battery. If you take the battery out and treat that as operational cost, the cost of an electric vehicle is the same as the cost of an IC engine vehicle. And if you take the battery and you take the depreciation and the interest cost, and if it drives about 100 kilometers a day, today the cost of the vehicles are equal. So for a taxi, it makes ideal sense because it does drive about 100 kilometers a day. But for personal vehicle, you may not drive 100 kilometers, you may drive 30, 40 kilometers. We'll come to the rural areas in a few minutes. What will happen in a few years from now? By 2020, the way the prices are coming down, electric vehicle versus petrol vehicles price in 2020. And I am again talking about in Indian context. Electric capital cost with battery will be equal to that of the petrol vehicle. So the capital cost will be the same. And operation cost will be only 0.2 times because now the battery has been removed out. So you are going to be 1/5 more as expensive in terms of operation cost with capital cost being the same. So what I'm talking about the electric vehicle is a future transport. And one has data, one has detailed analysis of how this can happen. So the way the prices of this is falling down, you can actually see that it's very obvious that this is going to happen. EV will happen in India too in 4 to 5 years. But if you let it happen, the world will take the lead and we will import it. And instead of importing oil, tomorrow we will end up importing EV subsystems. But if instead we decide to act today, we can make EV happen and take some kind of leadership. Now, if it cannot happen today just like that because it can happen in for example, taxis and things like that, but cannot happen everywhere. To take the lead in some specific, if we want to make it happen today, we have to take lead in some specific segment. And if we are able to do that, basically we will replace the oil by EV subsystem of about $130 billion by around 2030. And that includes motors, controllers, batteries, chargers, DC-DC converters. And all of them can be produced in India if we act today rather than wait for 4 to 5 years. And that's what I am going to talk briefly about. What is required to make it happen today? Well, the first thing is, you know, when we buy any vehicle, we normally look for how many kilometers does it go for a liter of petrol. This famous thing in India, kitna deta hai. Actually, we have to look at the same thing in electric vehicles. What is the number of kilometers will it travel per kilowatt of electricity? If we can minimize that, if we essentially make our motor engine efficiency higher, and this is what India over the last 6 months, year or so has been focused on, suddenly electric vehicles can happen today. Why will it happen today? Because if we can increase the efficiency and increase the number of kilometers per kilowatt, then the battery size will go down. And if the battery size goes down, the capital cost goes down. Remember, our only problem is capital cost. But the second thing that we can do is that we have to reduce the battery size. We have to reduce the battery size for the vehicle cost by using battery swapping. Now, one will say, oh, battery swapping was tried in Israel and it didn't work. That was several years back. For a variety of reasons, it did not work. We will have to make the battery swapping work. It will work in India because we will make it happen. It is not that difficult, just that we have to do the right thing. And if we do that, and if we get the lowest cost fast charging infrastructure, we can make the electric vehicle happen today. EVs will provide also, if you do this, the most important point that I want to make in context of the Smart Grid Forum is that EVs will provide the first large-scale storage that the growth in renewables need. All electric vehicles today would be about 15 to 20% of today's total electricity generation. So that much storage you can provide. And then you can do smart charging of EV batteries, demand management, and all that. That 15 to 20% today can start getting us the renewables without constraint. We of course have to do smart charging, but I think smart charging part we can actually do and demand response to get there, but we give a big boost to renewable. So if we make EV happen today, we can make renewables happen today and tomorrow. That's the first point that I want to make. This is not the only thing. Smart buildings and factories. In fact, I'm not going to talk about basically smart buildings today. It makes immense sense to have all kinds of storage. And when I'm talking about storage, not just batteries. For example, most urban buildings at least use a large amount of air conditioning. So you can use chilled water storage. The chilled water that you use, you can chill it whenever you want, store it in a thermal, in an insulated tank, and use it when you want. You can use that. You can use some intelligent way of using cold air storage. The fact that you can cool it about a degree or so more than what it is required when the power is surplus, and allow the temperature to go up slightly when the power is deficit. And of course, today all offices use UPS. Use that battery not just as a battery backup, but also for demand response. Charge it more when the grid is surplus. Use it when it is deficit. Cost of this is independently justified by the power savings of the bill. I'm not going to talk much about it. There is a paper that we have done. My colleague Dr. Prabjot Kaur is going to actually present it at 4:30 in the technical session, preparing for high mix of renewables in India's power generation, and how does this building will come about, and we will talk about it. But the next important thing, sir, and this is in context with what you had pointed out, how do you really make this thing happen in rural areas? You know, IIT Madras has taken this initiative a few years back of putting solar DC in every home. What is a solar DC? We are talking about putting a DC power line in a home instead of a AC power line. Now, when we first proposed it, everybody sort of said, have you gone mad? Because this DC versus AC debate took place 130 years back, and it was all settled. And every home all over the world has AC. Why are we talking about going DC? We pointed out the reason we are talking about is DC is because rooftop solar gives us DC only. And that has to be converted to AC, and that is a power loss. The battery that we use for storage stores only DC power. Whether we take input or output, both sides, we have to convert AC to DC and to charge the battery, and DC to AC when the battery gets discharged. Both have losses. We pointed out every appliance at homes and offices is gradually becoming DC. Take LED. LED is DC, it is not AC. We put in every LED bulb, we put a AC to DC converter. That's the losses, that's the extra cost, and that's the point of unreliability. The fans, in India uses fans heavily. The fans used to be AC motors, induction motors. Today, there are brushless DC motor and switch reluctance motors, which are far more energy efficient, about 2 times more energy efficient, 2.5 times more energy efficient than AC induction motor. And those motors are being made in India. So those can be actually used. What about electronics? Television is DC, the laptop is DC, cell phones are DC. The refrigerator, it is going to be again a brushless DC motor. A mixer, it is going to be again a DC motor. There is no AC device. There is no device which has inherent AC advantage. In fact, it is DC simply because DC is far more energy efficient. So we sort of say, why can't we switch to a DC line? There was a lot of reluctance, but we did it. We first built it, put it in our lab, then I was the first person, put it in my office, started working. In fact, people walked into my office and sort of said, have you really converted? When are you converting? I said, I've converted. He says, well, it looks the same. I say, yes, but look at the power bill. It is half, and now it is coming entirely from solar. I then went on to put that at my home. And when I converted my home into a DC home. And while it was giving me lower power and other things, one of the biggest thing that happened is that 2015 December, there was a huge floods in Chennai. 4 days there was no power in the city. Complete city had no power, no homes had power. My home, because of that little solar, I used only 125 watts of solar. That's all. And I had a little bit of power backup, and my home continued to function. Same thing was repeated this December when we had the cyclone strike us. 2 days, city had no power, my home had power. Today, many homes we had it. Ministry of Power, Shri Piyush Goyal came forward and asked us to prove this in the most difficult area, said Rajasthan desert in Jaisalmer and Jodhpur area bordering Pakistan. The grid doesn't go there. Can you go and connect there? We went to 4,000 homes in the deserts. We had to go on camel back because vehicles will not be able to go, or use a tractor. We are able to put those 4,000 homes. We are able to put now in Assam on the hills, we have been able to put it. And fortunately, this is a DC, complete DC, and solar rooftop. Can be done anywhere in India. And in fact, it was to a great surprise. 3 days back, IEEE Spectrum, some of you know about it, is a US society, international society, headquarters in US, in 2017 declared this solar DC technology as the technology of the year of 2017 in the service of society, and gave it the award. So this is what solar DC can do. What is more important in context of this? If you put a unit like this in every home, and I believe that this can go into every home, it will go on its own with a little bit of initial support, because we are talking about DC appliances in terms of maybe GST waiver or lower rate GST. After that, we don't need to support it. Every home will have it, just like every home has inverter today. And tomorrow, most homes will have this solar DC, and this will have the storage. This will become large-scale storage that the grid can tap. And renewables can, whenever they need to push in more power, they can push in more power into these batteries and take out the powers out of this. In fact, the way we are planning, sir, the same battery which goes into a 3-wheeler or a 2-wheeler can actually also go into homes. This is the way we are planning, and we believe that we can actually do this. Electric buildings, vehicles, smart buildings and factories, and solar DC at each home are highly beneficial for the segment they serve. Important thing is that they are independently justified. The storage is independently justified by the usage they provide, by the usefulness they provide. For the grid, it becomes in some sense a free source of storage. This is the way to build large-scale storage in India. Remember that India is not a country which can spend huge amount of money and just wait. We have lots of other issues, water problem, other problem. We have to do minimal amount of investment in electricity and our transport, and this actually is possible. But also large-scale storage that electric grid needs to enable renewable growth to an unprecedented level. Only when we enable these in India at Indian cost with Indian specifications, our grid will become smart, and not just by copying of the West. When I look at much of what we do in the name of smart grids, just look at what others are doing and try to copy. We do it differently, we can lead the world. Thank you very much.